What is up, y'all? Welcome back. Today is a swatch party. We are just going to be swatching my entire collection of relevant powder blushes against the 3 new shades. There are 6 total, but I bought the fair ones of the new Guerlain Terracotta blushes. These are $55 a piece. I bought them with my own money and I have been using them for a while. I think a lot of people already have reviews out for these, but I wanted to get my head around them, mainly because my initial impression of them was that I really like them. And so I wanted to make sure before I gave them a full-throated endorsement, because they're very expensive, that I got a really good idea of how I felt. So I have stacks of blushes. You've been seeing the backdrop of my videos for like probably weeks now, and those are all of the blushes in piles that are relevant to compare to each of these. So the 3 shade variations, and yes, there are a fair trio and a deep trio, which I think is really cool. Very much the line of thinking I went on when I put out both of my blush collabs with Fighting Ferdinand. So the colors here are light nude, light pink, and light coral. I was a little surprised because light nude really looks like pink. Light pink really looks like mauve, but you know, coral looks like coral. I have application footage comparing kind of cheek to cheek on all of these, and then we will get into the swatch party, so let's go ahead and jump in. All right, so our first little lady is the light nude. Again, they call this nude, but I think that it's more of a ballerina kind of pink. It's an extraordinarily sheer formula, y'all. Beautiful, goes on really slowly, super user-friendly, and extremely blurring. And it might just look kind of beige on me, but once you see it against the kind of mauve, which they're calling pink, try not to get confused, it might make a little bit more sense. So the one that they're calling pink is decidedly mauve. You can definitely see a lot more blue tone to it. It is fairly vivid in terms of a mauve. It's not super desaturated, but again, very sheer formula, and obviously a lighter version of this shade than the deep trio. And from what I've seen from the deep trio of these shades, they are much more pigmented as well. So I like to think that there was a lot of consideration taken here for how these were going to work on different skin tones, to have something for everybody. And finally, we have the coral, light coral, and this is obviously going to be the one that I lean the most towards. It's just the most flattering on my skin. I do find this one to be, and I mean, maybe I'm a little bit biased, I was just kind of pounding it on with a brush, but I do find that this color shows up the most vividly, at least on my skin tone, but only by a hair. So like I said, y'all, this is an incredibly beautiful formula. A lot of times we think, well, is it a luxury experience from the standpoint of the packaging? And obviously Guerlain does a nice job with that, but sometimes the formula inside could be comparable to something at the drugstore, something at a lower price point. And I do have some things to compare it to that are at a lower price point, but this is giving luxury. As you put it on, the entire experience not only reads luxurious in the sense that it's very beautiful and beautifying on the skin, but it also reads luxury in the sense that we are used to, at least for fair skin tones, luxury powder products being a little bit lower pigment and slower to apply, slower to build. All of that is true. I should also mention, there is the Guerlain fragrance in these. It's not as strong, I feel like, as the bronzers, but I don't have the bronzers on hand anymore. I could be wrong. It just doesn't seem to like stink up my entire makeup collection, but also all of these things are very personal, very subjective. If scents bother you, it is scented. So let us begin at the beginning here. I'm going to get a makeup wipe at the ready so that we don't have any obscuring of the shades. I'm going to take my little robe off here so that we have a lot of room, and we will start with light nude. I'm gonna get a big fat swatch. I'm like getting rid of the embossing at this point because I want to make sure that we can see really vividly the comparison here. So as you can see, pink, and as you can see, sheer. I really dug my finger in there and it's sheer. In no particular order here, we're starting in with 01 Silky Rose from Gucci. Is this my favorite blush formula in the world? No, this is very much an example of exquisite packaging, and it feels like the formula's kind of an afterthought. Like, it's not bad, but it's not memorable. 01 Silky Rose is similar, more pigmented, and a little bit more saturated, but very similar in temperature. Okay, next, and I honestly don't know whether this one is going to be more comparable to the coral leaning one or the pink leaning one, so I'm probably gonna swatch it with both. But this is the new powder blush duo from the spring collection from Chanel. And I'm just going to mix them together. It's a little bit more coral. Let me do the pink side just for science here. Again, this is another really sheer formula because we are talking about luxury. So there is the combo of the two and there is just the pink. So we're starting to see that this color here is not particularly unique, but we're also talking about very expensive things at this point. I mean, this guy's $50 and the Chanel is like 68 or something stupid like that. It might be like 75, I don't know, but it's more expensive than the Guerlain. So moving down the line here, I have House Labs Hibiscus Haze. There are just very few actual pinks in my collection. That's pretty darn close. Now, price per ounce, I have no idea where we stand at this point, comparability wise, because they shrunk the packages down so much. Like this is the old packaging and it's huge. So I'll have to like break down, the price per ounce of all of these, which is a hilarious thing to do that I'm committing myself to, but LFG, you know? All right, next I have Kiss of Pink from Bare Minerals. I have no idea how this is gonna go. I just knew that it was pink and I figured we'd wanna see what it looked like at EK. So there we have Kiss of Pink. It's shimmery for starters, and it's much more coral, like much more orange. And like, that's just not, I honestly should swatch that against the coral one. So note to self. Then we have RMS Bohemian Girl. She's also extraordinarily pink, probably not that comparable, and also very shimmery, but honestly, very similar in undertones, just a completely different take on blush. It's much more pigmented and it's shimmery. It does have a really nice mineral blur on the skin, but I mean, an entirely different finish. It's very, very shimmery. It's got a really beautiful shift to it. And then finally, we have Sephora collection here in So Shy. Oh, okay, that's very, very light and it's a little bit peacher, but this is an extraordinary formula. It's so beautiful and it comes in a lot of really nuanced shades. If you don't care about packaging, well, if you don't care about packaging, you don't want to pay $55 for a blush probably. But I would say that that's actually really comparable, as is Hibiscus Haze, and that's about it. The RMS is comparable only if you want, again, a completely different take on how the finish is going to look. Let's now go in with the mauve, shall we? And again, I was calling the nude pink, and I'm calling the pink mauve, and I'm really sorry. That first one was the nude, but this is the pink, and it's not my fault. Because it's not pink, it's mauve. So, you know, what are you gonna do? This is gonna be a fun one because I went through a phase for a long time of buying a lot of blushes in this color because I have a little bit of warmth in my skin and it'll turn a shade like this a little bit more beige, which is quite lovely. And if it's got enough purple in it, it's going to look absolutely incredible on olive skin tones. It has kind of a magical effect in that sense, and that is why I have quite the collection of them. I want to start by swatching this against Pat McGrath Divine Rose. I just think that the shades are really similar, which they are, and also, I've been kind of waiting to say this, but this is the most comparable formula to the Guerlain that I've found. It's a little more pigmented, but it builds so slowly. It's so beautiful, and it's ridiculously finely milled. This is also not an inexpensive blush. I think you can get them on sale on her website for around $35. Still, that's a lot better than $55. And if you've been on my channel long enough to remember my initial review of this formula, you'll know that me saying that this is the most comparable formula to this, that's an enormous compliment. I, at the time, was completely obsessed with these, totally in love. It is such a beautiful, slow building, finely milled, blurring formula. It's off the charts as powder blushes go, and I think that the colors are really gorgeous too. Pat McGrath has done some really boring things lately, but these blushes were genius. Next, I have the Blush Harmony from the Fall collection. If you have this, I think you can still find it maybe in Europe or like third-party websites and stuff, but this is definitely not for sale on like US Chanel. But this was the mauve shade that they put out last fall, and it was absolutely bananas, but obviously a completely different color. Just thought it was worth it because mauve versus mauve, but as you can see, they had a different idea of mauve. Next, I have the Gucci blush in 05 Rosy Beige. So this is going to be, yes, a little bit more beige, but I do think that it is comparable. No. And that's good. Someone told me in a comment recently, they were like, actually, when you swatch things and they don't compare at all, it's also really helpful. I'm thinking Dolce Vita is gonna be right on the money though. Yeah, this is NARS Dolce Vita. This is the, I was about to say this is the powder, obviously. But the reason that I bought this is because I fell in love with the Dolce Vita shade in their liquid blush, but that liquid blush formula is pretty disappointing. And so I was like, well, I'll buy the powder. It's like Pillow Talk, completely different colors, just totally different, have nothing to do with each other. So that was a little bit disappointing, but it is a pretty lovely mauve in a nice formula. Yeah, I would say Dolce Vita it's a little obviously more saturated and it's a little bit more purple. I mean, it makes this look kind of vivid pink. Yeah, I don't think they're comparable enough to call it a dupe. I still think Pat McGrath Divine Rose is the closest that we got. Shoot. Oh no, y'all. I missed one. Hang on, I'm gonna swatch it on the other wrist so that you see it. Because I have the Make Beauty. The problem is I can't see the shade from the outside, so I didn't know it was in the wrong pile. This is the Skin Mimetic Blush in Cosmic, and I'm swatching against Light Nude here just for reference because I have a feeling, yeah, that they're pretty similar. Cosmic is a little bit purpler, just ever so slightly. In fact, I will go ahead and put it against this, but they're pretty comparable. I always look like Pan's Labyrinth when I do that. I get in the weeds, and people appreciate me getting in the weeds, but I do get in the weeds. So there is that same color compared. Yeah, and it's pinker. I do think that it's relevant to put it against both though, because I also pulled Mystic Mauve from Make Beauty, and that was kind of what was supposed to be in this pile, but it might be further off the mark than that one was. That's why we play the game, you know? Yeah, it's more mauve. It's actually making pink look pink, which is kind of refreshing, but it is a very cool toned pink. All right, two more. Gotta make sure I stay in frame here. I have Self-Made in the Sephora blush. Again, these are, you know, I think they're like $15 or something. You can usually find them on sale. Not really comparable, a little more beige. Such a beautiful blush though. Regardless, if you like a mauve blush and you're fair skinned, I highly recommend that one just offhand, you know? And then I decided to include Kiss of Mauve again, just because of the name. So this is from Bare Minerals. Obviously this is the bronzer. I don't think it's going to really compare that closely. No, I would say that the closest we got there was Divine Rose from Pat McGrath. And I'm wondering if I have one that's even pinker. Hang on. So actually what I'm gonna do is I'm going to save all of my Pat McGraths here because I have 5 of them, and we will swatch them against all 3 of these at the end. It'll be its own individual, just Guerlain versus Pat McGrath swatch off. All right, so let's move into Coral. I thought that I had this planned well enough that I wasn't going to get completely in the weeds, but I found other weeds to get into. So here we go. And this is actually the one where I'm going to have to keep the most room on my arm because there are so many coral blushes in my collection. A lot. So there is Coral in the Guerlain. That's incontrovertible. Okay, I'm not gonna sit here and call that a different color than it is. It's Coral. It's an ugly swatch. It is an ugly swatch, but it's Coral. Starting in with Givenchy in the shade 30. This is one of my favorite coral blushes ever. And it's much oranger. Much oranger. It's like citrus looking, you know, like this would be grapefruit and this would be like a blood orange almost. Then we have Creamy Peach from the Soft Pop Powder Blush from Makeup by Mario. I do also love this formula. It's very finely milled. It is quite pigmented, but wow, that's comparable. That's a really comparable shade. Yes, it is. Very, very similar. I would say that you get a little bit more orange, a little tiny bit of more peach in the Guerlain, but not very much. Then we have another Bare Minerals bronzer. This one happens to be in Kiss of Copper. So I'm also doing a poor job of keeping room on my arm. We might have to do both arms, but obviously it's got a totally different finish and it is quite copper. Then we have the Blush Harmony from Chanel, the fall collection, in their coral shade. There were only 2, and this is the other one. She is a very autumnal coral. It's really giving a nice burnt orange, but not as pinky peachy as that. Now we have Amber Glow from Make Beauty, another beautiful coral in a beautiful formula that is not wildly off the charts expensive. They're actually pretty comparable. The make is just a lot more saturated, but like they're very, very similar. So if you already have this, you're not going to need to buy the Guerlain to like satisfy any new need. Next we have Surat Peau de Pêche, which is always going to be like the orangest, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. It's like giving tangerine. So there's that. Very similar to the Armani. Then we have Pomelo Peach in the old packaging from House Labs. And she's actually pretty pink, so it might be right on the money here. Yeah, it's pinker. The Haus Labs is pinker by a lot. Okay, then we have the Givenchy Prism Libre blush here in their gorgeous coral color, which is much easier to use than it is to swatch. This is a fragranced blush. It is one of my favorite blushes ever. Ooh, they're really similar. They're really similar. Whoa, they're so similar. You do not need that if you have the Givenchy. They're super, super similar. Similar. It's only a matter of time before I started saying that, but it's a I still think you might not be able to tell them apart on the cheeks. And then finally, we have my singular drugstore product because I am so relatable and down to earth. This is the Baked Powder Blush in Luminoso from Milani, a classic. Not bad, Milani. Not bad, Milani. It is so similar to the Givenchy. It's just obviously quite shimmery, but it is super, super beautiful. It's really funny. It's like the Givenchy and Milani Luminoso are actually probably the most similar to that coral shade. So now we're going to do just the swatch party between Pat McGrath and the Guerlain blushes. We will start by swatching all three of the Guerlain blushes. By the way, I did drop one. I dropped this one, the pink, and the packaging is now off kilter, so when it closes, it's really hard to open it again. Food for thought, but I also am borderline abusive to my makeup. All right, so we're gonna have to keep these straight. Obviously, it's not gonna be that hard because they're different from each other, but I am gonna be swatching several different colors of one brand rather than all the same color of different brands. It's like playing poker, you know? It's like just a different kind of hand. So there we have all three together, the coral, the light nude, and the light pink. That's just what they're called. And we will start in no particular order. We'll just go back in with Divine Rose from Pat McGrath. This is, you know, an OG shade. And we know that it is the most similar to the pink that I'm calling mauve. Then we have Flirtatious, which I know you're all dying to see. Flirtatious is so fair and so beige. And yet, on some people, if you have a very fair green complexion, it's still gonna go a little bit peachy on you. So yeah, that's super beige. Not comparable to any of them. Then we have Nude Venus. And when they're in the pan, it's really hard to tell what the undertones are, but I think that this one is a little bit more coral. Yes, so it's more comparable to the coral, but it's still just like a softer, more desaturated beige. And that one doesn't have a shift on it, I don't think. And if it does, it's so faint. Then we have Nymphette. I think Nymphette might have a shift on it. Yes, Nymphette has a shift on it. There is Nymphette. Ooh. Ooh, Nymphette is kind of a dead ringer for the pink that I'm calling mauve. Let's do a little bit better of a swatch. There we go. Yeah. Yeah. That's really, really close. I would say that those go together, you know? Then the last one here is Divine Rose 3, which I don't own Divine Rose 2, I don't think. I don't keep enough track of Pat McGrath blushes or Pat McGrath's releases in general, but I did buy a lot of these blushes. And that one, again, it's kind of more coral, huh? That's Divine Rose? It looks coral. For science, I'm just gonna put the coral right up against it because I can't keep it straight here. Comparable, but not dupalicious. I'm running out of brain cells. And here is the final breakdown of price per ounce for all of these blushes. So starting with Armani as the highest price per ounce, that was surprising to me, followed closely by the Guerlain blushes we're talking about today. I was surprised to see that Chanel, the spring and fall collections, are actually right there in the middle with like Bare Minerals and Surratt. And also that Haus Labs, even at the new smaller size, is comparable cost per ounce with Makeup by Mario, which we would never question. So food for thought. So hopefully that was helpful for y'all to see maybe what you might want to buy instead of these because they are really beautiful. They really are, but they're $55 a piece and they are also like scented and that's not everybody's thing. There are comparable shades in the world in luxury and prestige that could probably satisfy a similar itch. And also it might have helped you to see if you already have something else in your collection and you don't even need to buy it at all. So if this was helpful, y'all, please do give the video a thumbs up. If you're new here, this is what we do. We swatch and we compare. This is just a very concentrated swatch party, but we tend to do a lot of swatching and comparing in all of my videos. We focus mainly on luxury and prestige. We talk about color theory, try and make makeup more fun, more easy for everybody, and hopefully helping you get the most value out of your beauty purchases. So if that sounds good to you, then subscribe while you're here. And I will put a video up here that I think y'all will enjoy if you liked this one. I love y'all so much, my current subscribers. You're the best, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.